The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows of the lakeside chapel, painting the floor in soft mosaics of rose, gold, and violet. Ava stood in her lace gown at the threshold of the aisle, hands trembling slightly around her bouquet of white peonies, heart fluttering in nervous joy. Everything was as she had imagined: rows of loved ones, the gentle hum of string instruments, the faint scent of lavender drifting through the air. Then a sound, wheels crunching gravel outside, heads turned. Whispers rippled like a wave across the pews. Ava's breath caught as the towering double doors slowly creaked open. There, backlit by the late morning sun, stood her sister Natalie, glowing like a movie star, framed in luxury that didn't belong to their world. Ava blinked, stunned. Natalie wasn't wearing the dusty rose bridesmaid gown they'd agreed on. Instead, she was swathed in a slinky, pearl-white Dior masterpiece that shimmered with every step. A cascade of diamonds sparkled from her neck and wrists, and her stilettos clicked audibly against the marble floor as if announcing her dominance. Behind her, a livery driver in a white glove waited beside a vintage silver Rolls-Royce. It wasn't just an entrance, it was a statement. Gasps rose. Phones discreetly lifted. The violinist faltered mid-note. Ava's childhood best friend leaned in and whispered, "Is that Natalie?" Ava's stomach twisted. Natalie met her gaze with a smile. Not warm, not apologetic, but calculating, almost amused. In an instant, Ava's memories of shared ramen dinners and split rent checks dissolved into something surreal. How had her sister, a woman who once cried over overdraft fees, become this? A bridesmaid nudged Ava gently, snapping her back into place. She swallowed hard and began her walk down the aisle, but her vision blurred, not from happy tears, but confusion, humiliation, and something worse, betrayal in its earliest form. Ava didn't know what was happening. But one thing was painfully clear: this wasn't just her wedding day anymore. Natalie had stolen the spotlight, and the story was only beginning. The clink of champagne glasses and rustle of silk napkins echoed through the reception hall like background static, but Ava could barely hear it over the thudding in her chest. She sat at the head table in a daze, watching Natalie glide from guest to guest like she owned the place. Her laugh, just a touch too loud, cut through the room like a blade made of crystal. Natalie was dazzling, unapologetically radiant, and Ava couldn't stop staring. She scanned her sister's profile for clues: a new sharpness in her cheekbones, a confidence in her posture that hadn't been there 6 months ago, when they'd both cried over dollar store wine and joked about maxed-out credit cards. There had been no mention of investments, windfalls, or couture wardrobes. No whispers of wealth. Natalie had shown up to every family gathering in the same threadbare coat and claimed she couldn't swing even a weekend getaway for Ava's bachelorette. So why now? Why this? Ava's bridal bouquet lay forgotten in her lap, its ribbon unraveling slowly, like her sense of reality. She tried to remember the last time she and Natalie had truly connected. Had there been signs she missed? Lies so smoothly told she mistook them for love? When Natalie finally approached the table, the chatter around them fell into a hush. She raised a crystal flute and tapped it lightly with a manicured nail, each ting slicing through the air like a drum roll. "To my sister," Natalie purred, her voice rich with something Ava couldn't name. Mockery? Triumph? "May this be the real beginning of your happily ever after." Ava flinched. The words were innocent, but the smile behind them was not. There was no hug, no warm memory, no teary-eyed toast from one sister to another. Just that infuriating, secretive smirk. And for the first time in her life, Ava felt like a stranger at her own wedding. Her sister's world was suddenly miles above hers, dripping in diamonds, cloaked in mystery, and Ava realized with a chill that she hadn't just lost the spotlight. She'd lost Natalie. Or maybe she'd never truly known her at all. The wedding was over, but Ava's nerves hadn't settled. The celebration had been beautiful in theory. Soft lighting, clinking glasses, curated playlists, but it all felt hollow now, like an echo of a moment she hadn't truly lived. Somewhere between the first dance and the final toast, reality had cracked. Now, in the quiet of the bridal suite, Ava slipped off her heels and sank into a velvet chair. The silence pressed down on her like a second skin. Her maid of honor had already left. The planner had taken the scheduled clipboard and disappeared. The only thing left on the marble side table was a single glossy envelope with a handwritten note. "For you. From Natalie." Ava's throat tightened. She opened it cautiously, half expecting another glib message or cryptic jab. But what spilled out stopped her breath: a property deed, complete with a ribbon, a gold-foiled seal, and a note clipped to the top with Natalie's distinct, flourished handwriting. "Your new start deserves a better view. Enjoy the penthouse. You're welcome, N." The air left Ava's lungs. The address was unmistakable. One of the city's most exclusive high-rises, the kind they used to pass by and jokingly point at, pretending to be rich women on the run from their boring lives. But this wasn't a fantasy. Natalie had bought her a luxury condo. No, not bought. She had delivered it. Wrapped it up like a trophy. Like a consolation prize. Ava stared at the note. The words weren't loving. They weren't generous. They were cold. Transactional. Dominant. "You're welcome." As if she'd asked for this. As if it were owed. And suddenly, the memory of Natalie's toast came flooding back. That smug smile. The way she'd clinked her glass and watched Ava with a predator's calm. It hadn't been a tribute. It had been a warning. Ava stood, the deed still in her hands, the diamonds on Natalie's wrist flashing in her mind like sirens. Something was off, far beyond vanity or flair. Natalie didn't give gifts without purpose. She never had. This wasn't a celebration, it was bait. And for the first time since the vows, Ava's sadness cooled into something sharper. She would not be bought. She would not be pitied. She tucked the deed back into the envelope and placed it in the drawer of her nightstand, right beside a pen and a fresh notebook. If Natalie wanted to play games, Ava was done playing dumb. It started with a hunch, a gut-level itch Ava couldn't ignore. After the wedding, she couldn't shake the sense that Natalie's sudden wealth wasn't new, it was just newly flaunted. The way she moved, the way she spoke, how effortlessly she navigated the elite guest list she'd helped organize. It all hinted at a lifestyle lived in secret, not one recently acquired. Natalie hadn't won the lottery, she'd been hiding something. So Ava did what she'd always done when the world felt off balance. She went digging. She started at their late grandfather's estate attorney's office, half expecting to find nothing but polite refusals and locked drawers. But when she mentioned her grandfather's name, Richard Caldwell, the clerk hesitated just long enough to give Ava hope. "I'm not supposed to share anything without authorization," the clerk whispered, glancing around before lowering her voice. "But your name is on the file, alongside Natalie's." Ava's pulse quickened. An hour later, she stood alone in the dim, wood-paneled vault of a downtown bank, facing a safety deposit box that hadn't been opened in over a decade. With trembling hands, she unlocked it. Inside, a bundle of legal documents, faded photographs, and tucked in a worn leather folder, a will dated 3 months before their grandfather's passing. Ava sat down on the cold bench as her eyes scanned the contents. "To my granddaughters Ava Grace and Natalie Marie, I leave equal shares of my estate, liquid assets, trust holdings, and all Caldwell family property, to be held in joint stewardship until their 30th birthdays, at which point the assets may be divided or liquidated by mutual agreement. Equal shares. Not one dime more, not one less." Ava's hands shook as she turned to the final page. 2 signatures stared back at her. Her own, added when she was barely out of high school, and Natalie's, both witnesses present. She had no memory of this. No memory of any discussion of a trust. Just vague recollections of hospital visits, somber suits, and closed doors after the funeral. Had Natalie known all along? The rest of the documents confirmed her fear. The trust had matured 2 years ago, well after Natalie turned 30. Ava, the younger of the two, would have become eligible only months ago, but the assets had already been moved, liquidated, transferred. Only one sister had cashed in, and she'd done it in silence. Ava gripped the folder like it was a lifeline and blinked back tears. Her heart wasn't just broken, it was betrayed. Natalie hadn't stumbled into money. She'd taken what was meant to be shared, and then paraded it like a trophy. This wasn't just about wealth. It was about lies, years of them. And Ava was done accepting Natalie's silence as love. Ava couldn't sleep. The weight of the documents, the secret inheritance, the knowing that Natalie had kept this from her, gnawed at her every time she closed her eyes. The world felt warped. The past, a lie. Her sister, her best friend, had betrayed her in the most insidious way. But tonight, there would be no more hiding. She had spent the entire day combing through every scrap of paper she could find. Letters, old photographs, trust fund statements, everything. Now, she needed to face Natalie, to demand answers. Ava drove to Natalie's penthouse, the address from the deed still burning in her pocket. The irony wasn't lost on her. The sister she'd thought was struggling, the one who couldn't afford a weekend getaway, was now living in a space far beyond anything Ava had ever imagined. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel as she pulled into the underground parking garage, the echo of her car's engine reverberating against the cold concrete walls. When she stepped into the elevator, Ava's heart hammered against her ribs. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure what she would do with the storm of emotions that roiled inside her. Anger? Hurt? A desire for justice? The elevator dinged, and the doors slid open to a sleek modern lobby. The walls were polished stone. The lighting, soft but luxurious. She rang the doorbell. Natalie opened the door with a faint, practiced smile. "Ava, what's all this about?" Her voice was smooth, too smooth, like she had already anticipated this confrontation. Ava didn't bother with pleasantries. "You lied to me, Natalie." Natalie's eyes flickered, but she recovered quickly, stepping back to let Ava inside. The penthouse was everything Ava had imagined, expansive, cold, and filled with expensive things. But it was empty, devoid of warmth. No family photos, no hints of the sister she once knew. Ava slammed the folder of papers onto the glass coffee table. "You knew about the inheritance. You've been living on our money for years, and you never told me." Natalie didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head, almost in mock sympathy. "I don't know what you're talking about, Ava. If you're referring to that inheritance, I did what I had to do." "What are you talking about?" Ava's voice cracked as the words tumbled out. "You stole from me, from both of us. All these years, I thought we were in this together. And now I find out that you've been playing me for a fool, living this life, while I—" Ava stopped herself, the words too sharp, too painful to finish. "While you what? Struggled?" Natalie's voice was colder now, biting, and she took a step toward Ava. "You were the good daughter, Ava. You played the role, always doing the right thing, always the responsible one. Someone had to take care of things." Ava's breath caught. "What do you mean? What are you trying to say?" Natalie's eyes darkened, the playful edge vanishing. "You don't know, do you? About our father?" Ava's throat constricted. The name, the very thought of their father was something she had long buried. The man who had seemed larger than life, their protector, until the rumors started, until his fall from grace. She knew there had been whispers, but she had never asked too many questions. She didn't want to know, she didn't want to hear the truth. But now, staring at her sister, Ava couldn't stop the growing sense that everything had been tainted by secrets. "He made mistakes, Ava, big ones." Natalie's voice was sharp now, cutting through the silence. "And when you exposed them, you didn't just stir the pot. You set the whole damn thing on fire. You almost ruined everything. My inheritance, my deal with Uncle Roy, everything." Ava's heart dropped. "What are you talking about? What deal?" Natalie let out a bitter laugh. "You really have no idea, do you? When you applied for that family history grant, you dug up a mess you didn't even understand. A scandal so ugly that if anyone ever knew the full truth about Dad's past, it would have destroyed the family name and the money that came with it." Ava took a step back, her mind reeling. "So that's why you kept it from me? To protect your precious inheritance? And then you manipulated me into believing we were struggling together when you were sitting on a fortune?" Natalie smirked, leaning back against the plush couch, her eyes cold. "It was for your own good. I kept the peace, Ava. I kept the family together. And you were too pure to get your hands dirty. I had to protect both of us. All of us." Ava stared at her sister, the words settling like shards of glass in her chest. She wanted to scream, to demand the truth, to tear the whole world apart in one moment of pure, unfiltered rage. But something inside her snapped. Something dark. The loss of trust, the betrayal, the realization that everything she had believed about her sister was nothing more than an illusion. Ava stood, her hands trembling. "You're disgusting." Natalie didn't flinch. "You're welcome." Ava spun on her heel and walked out without another word. As the elevator doors closed, she felt like a part of her died. And in the deepest corner of her mind, a single, terrible thought began to take root. It was time to take everything back. Everything. Ava couldn't breathe. She had barely walked through the reception hall doors when the weight of her sister's betrayal came crashing back down on her. The grand ballroom was decked out in a flurry of white roses and gold accents, a vision of elegance. But as Ava stepped into the midst of the crowd, the smiles, laughter, and congratulations felt hollow. Every face seemed to wear a mask, a polite expression that barely hid their fascination with Natalie, who, in her head-turning couture gown, was the star of the night. Ava's stomach churned. The whispers were more pronounced now. "Did you see her? The Rolls-Royce, the diamonds. How did she afford that?" But it wasn't just the guests who were staring at Natalie with awe. Ava couldn't ignore the pointed glances being sent her way, sympathetic ones, like she was the victim in a story she couldn't quite piece together. And then, through the sea of faces, she saw him. Ethan. Her ex. Ava's heart lurched, a painful, visceral reaction she hadn't been prepared for. The man who once swore to be her future, the man she had loved with all her heart. He was standing there, in the middle of her wedding reception, casually sipping a glass of champagne as if he belonged. His eyes locked onto hers, a flicker of recognition passing through them before he quickly masked it with a wide grin. But it wasn't just the shock of seeing Ethan that caused Ava to stumble in place. It was the realization that, just like everything else tonight, his presence was no accident. Her mind raced. Why was he here? She hadn't invited him. No one had. Not even her closest friends. And then it hit her, Natalie. Before Ava could react, she felt a sharp tug on her arm. She turned to see Natalie, glowing, completely unfazed, her lips curling into a knowing smile. "Ethan looks good, doesn't he?" Ava's jaw clenched. "What is he doing here, Natalie? Why is he here?" Natalie's smile widened, though it was anything but friendly. "Oh, you didn't know? I invited him. You remember the good old days, don't you?" Ava's stomach twisted. Ethan hadn't just shown up. He had been paid to be there. The realization felt like a slap across her face. "I thought you two might want to catch up," Natalie continued, taking a sip of her champagne, her voice sweet but venomous beneath the surface. "You always were so emotional about him." Ava could barely form words. "You paid him to come here?" "Oh, come on, Ava. You didn't think I'd let this night go smoothly, did you?" Natalie's voice dripped with mocking sweetness. "You're my sister, after all. We share everything, remember?" Ava's vision blurred for a moment. The walls of the ballroom seemed to close in on her as her mind flashed back to the years she and Ethan had spent together. The good times, the passion, the promises they'd made. Until it had all fallen apart because of her. Because of Natalie. That's what she had meant when she said Ava was emotional about him. Natalie knew exactly how to strike where it hurt. It wasn't just about sabotaging the wedding. It was about reminding Ava of everything she had lost. Everything she thought she could never get back. "Why would you do this to me, Natalie?" Ava whispered, the words thick with disbelief. "Why destroy everything?" Natalie's eyes darkened, a slight flicker of something colder flashing behind her usual facade of control. "Because you don't understand, Ava. You never did. I had to fight for everything. For my life, for my future. You were always content to sit on the sidelines and play by the rules. I had to break those rules to survive." Ava's breath caught in her throat. "By manipulating me? By destroying everything we had? By lying to me? Do you even hear yourself?" But before Natalie could answer, the sound of footsteps interrupted them. Ethan appeared at Ava's side, a smile on his lips that felt like a betrayal in itself. "Hey, Ava," he said softly, his voice somehow a mix of affection and regret. "You look beautiful." She tried to fight the wave of emotions threatening to overwhelm her: hurt, anger, confusion. "What are you doing here, Ethan?" she asked again, her voice trembling. Ethan glanced at Natalie, who was now looking at him with an unreadable expression. Then, turning back to Ava, he spoke in a low voice that only she could hear. "She paid me, Ava. Told me it was part of the deal. I didn't want to, but she made me." Ava's head spun. It was one thing for Natalie to play these games, but to drag Ethan into it, to manipulate him into being part of her scheme? She could feel the blood rush to her face as the pieces fell into place. This wasn't just about controlling her wedding. It was about keeping Ava on the defensive, about creating chaos in her life until she could no longer tell what was real or what was a lie. "Why?" Ava whispered, her voice breaking. "Why did you do this to me?" Ethan shook his head, guilt written all over his face. "I'm sorry, I didn't want to hurt you, Ava, but she's relentless." I couldn't say no. "Don't bother," Ava muttered, her throat tight as the words barely escaped. "You've both destroyed enough." She turned and walked away from them both, the noise of the reception swelling around her, but none of it mattered. In that moment, Ava realized the full extent of Natalie's manipulation. Every detail, every moment she'd believed was real, was nothing but a carefully orchestrated illusion. The wedding she had dreamed of, her fairy tale, was falling apart at the seams, and in the center of it all was her sister, the one person who had sworn to always be by her side and had betrayed her in the worst way possible. As Ava found a quiet corner, she glanced back over her shoulder. Ethan and Natalie were talking now, but she couldn't bring herself to care. It was done. There was no going back. Ava didn't know what was worse, the humiliation of what had already happened, or the gnawing sense that she'd only begun to scratch the surface of the twisted game Natalie had been playing. She couldn't escape the feeling that everything about this day, this moment, had been carefully orchestrated. Natalie had turned her wedding into her own personal revenge stage, and Ava was the unwitting star of the show. But why? The evening dragged on, the guests and well-wishers offering their condolences, but Ava couldn't shake the knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. She barely ate, barely spoke, her mind replaying the interactions over and over. How had it all gotten to this point? She retreated to a quiet corner of the reception hall, the shadows of the room swallowing her up like a dark, lonely cocoon. Her thoughts were spiraling, and she couldn't silence the questions clawing at her. Why had Natalie gone so far to ruin her wedding? What did she want from Ava? Was this all just about the inheritance? Ava had always known her sister was ambitious. Too ambitious, maybe, but there had to be more to this story than money. She remembered the look in Natalie's eyes when she mentioned her father's past. That's when Ava's suspicions flared. Could it be that everything Natalie had done, the manipulation, the betrayal, the calculated moves, was tied to something deeper, something darker? As Ava sat there, trying to piece together the puzzle, the door behind her creaked open. She froze, her heart racing. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The sound of heels clicking against the polished floor confirmed her fear. "Natalie." "Still sulking, Ava?" Natalie's voice was sweet, but there was an unmistakable edge to it now. "The party's still going on, you know. You should go back out there and act like everything's fine." Ava didn't answer. She wasn't sure she could without exploding. "I know what you're thinking," Natalie continued, leaning casually against the doorframe. "You're trying to figure out why I did all this. Why I made sure your perfect day fell apart. Trust me, you're not even close." Ava's breath hitched, her heart pounding in her chest. She turned to face her sister, her voice low, dangerous. I don't care what your reasons are. What you did was unforgivable." Natalie smiled, almost as if she was enjoying this. "Oh, you're angry. I get it. But listen carefully, Ava. You've been playing the victim for too long. You don't know the full story, do you?" Ava felt a cold shiver run down her spine. There it was again, the feeling that she wasn't seeing the whole picture, that there was a piece she was missing, something crucial. Natalie pushed herself off the doorframe and stepped closer, her voice dropping to a more intimate, conspiratorial tone. "You know what really made me do this, don't you? What really set me off?" Ava's pulse quickened, but she refused to give in. "Tell me then. Let's hear your excuse." Natalie's eyes darkened as she took a step toward her, her words laced with venom. "You did, Ava. You exposed it. You dug up the past." Ava's mind stalled for a moment, trying to catch up. "What are you talking about? I never did anything like that." "Oh, but you did," Natalie purred, her voice full of cruel amusement. "When you applied for that family history grant last year, you accidentally exposed our father's dirty little secret. That's when everything started to fall apart." Ava froze. The family history grant. She had applied for it to learn more about their family's roots. It had seemed like a simple, innocent project, something to pass the time. But now, the weight of her actions hit her like a freight train. "What secret?" Ava whispered, barely able to form the words. She had known their father had his flaws, but nothing had ever felt like a scandal. He'd been a man of mystery in their family, sure, but never a criminal, not in her mind. "Oh, Ava," Natalie said with a smirk, "you're so innocent, aren't you? You really didn't know, did you? Our dear father wasn't just some misunderstood genius. He was involved in something much worse. He was part of a criminal organization. Money laundering, fraud, the whole thing." Ava's heart seemed to stop beating. Her father? A criminal? It was inconceivable. She'd always admired him. He had always been a hero in her eyes. How could she have missed this? How could their family, her family, have lived in such ignorance? "You're lying," Ava said hoarsely, shaking her head in disbelief. "Oh, I wish I were," Natalie said, her voice low and cold. "But the truth is, Ava, that grant application you filled out, it went public. And when it did, the details of our father's illegal dealings were exposed. I lost everything. The inheritance, the deal I made with Uncle Richard, the trust was on the line, and I nearly lost it all." Ava's mind reeled. The inheritance, the trust, the deal. It all started to make sense now. Why Natalie had been so desperate to keep their family's past buried. Why she had used any means necessary to silence Ava and protect herself. "So that's why you're doing this? Why you've tried to ruin everything?" Ava choked out, the realization hitting her like a slap. "It's not just that, Ava," Natalie said, her voice almost sad now. "You exposed our father's mistakes. And I wasn't about to let you ruin the life I built on the back of his lies. You had to learn that I wasn't just a poor little sister anymore. I had to win, Ava. I had to survive." Ava's breath caught in her throat as the full weight of Natalie's actions crushed her. It wasn't just about money or revenge. It was about Natalie's survival. Her fight to keep everything she had gained, even if it meant sacrificing their relationship, and Ava along the way. Ava swallowed hard, her fists clenched at her sides. She had trusted her sister. She had loved her. And now she didn't know who this person standing before her even was. "What happens now, Natalie?" Ava asked, her voice trembling with the force of her emotions. "What do you want from me?" "I don't want anything from you, Ava," Natalie said, her eyes flickering with something like regret. "Just for a moment. You've already lost. You've been outplayed." And with that, Natalie turned and walked out of the room, leaving Ava alone with the cold, bitter truth. The morning after the wedding should have been quiet, hung over laughter, coffee brewing, and a few leftover guests reliving the highlights. Instead, Ava woke up to headlines. Heiress sister stuns at wedding, in daring display of wealth. Bride upstaged? Socialite Natalie Reeve turned sister's wedding into fashion show and media circus. A wedding? Or a war? Ava's hands trembled as she scrolled through the barrage of articles and Instagram reels. The images were damning. Her wedding, once intimate and elegant, now splashed across the internet like tabloid fodder. Cameras had zoomed in on Natalie's diamond necklace, rumored to be worth 6 figures. And on the moment she clinked her glass to toast Ava with a smirk that now looked downright venomous. But what stunned Ava more were the faces she didn't recognize. She flipped through the guest list photos and paused. Row after row of strangers, none of them friends or extended family. No, these were bloggers, influencers, gossip columnists, even a few reality stars who'd once graced the covers of trashy tabloids. One woman had live-streamed the bouquet toss. Another had been interviewed on the red carpet Natalie had installed at the reception entrance. A red carpet at her wedding. Ava's mouth went dry. She bolted from the hotel suite and stormed into the planner's office downstairs, barely waiting for an explanation. "Who authorized these guests?" she demanded, slamming a tablet down with one of the videos queued up. The planner, a usually confident woman named Denise, looked up with a guilty wince. I thought you did. Your sister, Natalie, forwarded the updated guest list and said you'd approve the changes directly." Ava staggered back. Her head throbbed. "She forged my approval?" Denise bit her lip. "She said you were too overwhelmed to manage the final RSVPs. I'm sorry, I should have verified." Ava left before she said something she couldn't take back. She knew it wasn't Denise's fault. Natalie had manipulated everything, again. But the full scale of it was only now becoming clear. As Ava walked back toward her suite, her heels echoing down the marble hallway, her thoughts raced. She pulled up her original guest spreadsheet and compared it line by line. Natalie hadn't just added people, she'd removed them. Close friends from college, Ava's old ballet teacher, even a cousin who flew in from Ireland, gone. In their place, people who would ensure Ava's humiliation went viral. Ava collapsed onto the bed, hands shaking as she dialed Grace, her maid of honor. "I think she planned the whole thing," Ava whispered. "She changed the guest list. She brought in influencers. She hijacked my wedding." There was silence on the other end before Grace said, "Ava, remember the florist issue?" Ava blinked. "What about it?" "She wasn't sick. I called her last night to check in. She said she was told you fired her, same with the caterer. And the DJ Natalie replaced every vendor you handpicked." Ava sat up straighter, fury surging beneath her skin like wildfire. "She replaced them? With who?" "People her PR team works with. That singer who performed during your father-daughter dance? She's on Natalie's payroll." Ava felt as though the air had been knocked from her lungs. This wasn't just a prank. It wasn't even just revenge. Natalie had meticulously dismantled Ava's wedding piece by piece and rebuilt it as a spectacle, her spectacle. And now Ava knew why. The wedding had been a smokescreen, a glittering distraction to divert attention from something else. Something Natalie had been trying to hide or delay. The timing, the grandeur, the media, it was all too perfectly timed. It wasn't just about humiliating Ava, it was about controlling the narrative. Natalie knew the secret Ava had stumbled upon. The inheritance, the deal with Uncle Richard, and now the looming threat of exposure. So she did what Natalie did best: deflect, distract, and dominate. Ava stared out the window at the ocean waves crashing against the cliffs. She felt raw, stripped, but a steely resolve began to build in her bones. Natalie might have turned her wedding into a media circus, but Ava had seen the curtain pulled back. And now? She wasn't afraid to burn the tent down. The documents were brittle with age, folded meticulously, and hidden behind a false wall in the family safe. Ava had returned to the estate, not to forgive, not to forget, but to find the truth Natalie had buried so carefully beneath glitter and gossip. The will was real. Her grandfather's signature, his careful script, unmistakable. Ava scanned the parchment with mounting dread. The terms were clear. The trust fund was to be split equally between Ava and Natalie. Equal. That word struck her harder than any slap could. So why had Natalie lived like a queen while Ava scraped by with bounced checks and whispered apologies? Her hands shaking, Ava examined the amendment, paperclipped to the back. It looked official at first. Stamped, notarized, dated 3 weeks before their grandfather's death. But something felt off. The signature, her grandfather's, was heavier, inconsistent, sloppier. She looked closer. Then she saw it. A line of ink that bled through like it had been traced over. Not once, but twice. Her breath caught. It wasn't just a forgery, it was a poorly done one. Ava's heart pounded as she flipped to the notary stamp and made a call. The woman who picked up, her voice tired and clipped, confirmed what Ava feared. "I never signed off on that," the notary said. "And I certainly wasn't in the state that year." Ava sat in stunned silence. The amendment was fake, which meant Natalie and their uncle had forged the document. They'd illegally altered their grandfather's final wishes, siphoning off what was meant to be shared. And worse, they'd kept Ava compliant through lies, dangling sisterhood like a charm bracelet, wrapping deceit in birthday calls and shared grief. Her phone buzzed. A text from Natalie. "We need to talk. Privately." Ava didn't reply. Instead, she reached for the file folder marked Correspondence, a trove of letters from their grandfather to their uncle, Richard. At first, they seemed benign, updates about investments, photos of the sisters. But one letter, dated 6 months before his death, changed everything. "I worry about Ava. She's always been the moral compass, too trusting, too eager to believe in the best. But if anything happens to me, she must know the truth. I've arranged for the trust to reflect my love for them both. Equally, don't let Natalie or anyone sway that." There it was. Proof, emotional, and legal. Ava sank into the leather chair, stunned. This wasn't just a betrayal of money, it was a betrayal of identity, of trust, of the belief that even if they were flawed, family protected each other. She stared out at the fog curling along the edge of the estate's garden, trying to make sense of the whirlwind. If she went public with this, the fallout would be nuclear. Natalie would lose everything. Her uncle could face charges. And their father's already tarnished name? Dragged through the mud all over again. But if she stayed silent, she'd be complicit. Just another Reeve keeping up appearances while the rot festered beneath the surface. In that moment, Ava realized the choice before her wasn't just about justice. It was about who she wanted to become. Was she the sister who stayed silent and smiled for holiday cards? Or the woman who stood up, even if it meant standing alone? The champagne had long gone warm, the music now background noise to a room thick with tension. The guests, once buzzing from wedding cheer, now lingered with an uneasy energy. Something was coming. They could feel it, and so could Ava. She stood at the edge of the reception tent, fingers curled around the stems of a perfectly arranged bouquet, petals trembling in her grip like her heart had all morning. She had replayed every moment. Natalie's grand entrance, the gift with strings, the cruel stunt with her ex, the forged will, the lies, the manipulation, the stolen legacy. But this wasn't going to be a quiet exit. Not anymore. As the MC tapped the microphone, preparing to cue the bouquet toss, Ava stepped forward instead. All eyes turned to her, stunned, expectant. She walked past the champagne tower, past her mother's disapproving frown, past Natalie, who watched her with an unreadable expression, lips glossed in arrogance and fear. Ava raised the bouquet like a mic drop. "I was supposed to toss this," she said, her voice steady, slicing through the hush. "But I've already caught something else today, truth. And I can't carry that into a future built on lies." A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. Most just stared. "I grew up believing family was about loyalty, trust, and love. I stood by my sister when we had nothing, scraped together rent, cried over our parents, skipped birthday gifts to keep the lights on. I thought we were struggling together." She turned to Natalie now, her tone tightening. "But one of us was just pretending." Natalie's face twitched. "She hid millions, lied about our grandfather's will, forged documents, bought silence, sabotaged my wedding." Ava's voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "All because I accidentally exposed a secret she was willing to sell our souls to bury." A murmur rolled through the guests like thunder. "And you know what?" Ava said, stepping onto the platform meant for her first dance. "I won't let my life be another chapter in someone else's cover-up. Not hers. Not our uncle's. Not even my father's." She held the bouquet up, trembling, but strong. Then, in a slow, deliberate motion, she pulled one of the reception candles from its holder and lit the base of the bouquet. Flames licked the petals, curling them black as gasps rang out. For anyone wondering what this day is really about, it's not the dress or the ring or the lies we're told to smile through. It's about freedom. She dropped the flaming bouquet into a champagne bucket, steam hissing as fire met ice. "I'm not walking down an aisle," she said. "I'm walking away. Silence followed. Then a ripple of shocked applause. Hesitant at first, then growing louder as Ava turned, heels echoing against the hardwood floor, veil abandoned behind her like a ghost of who she could have been. Natalie called after her once, just her name. No apology, no denial, just a hollow, shaken whisper. Ava didn't look back. She stepped into the night, into the unknown, but this time on her own terms. No borrowed time, no stolen promises. Just the woman she had become, and the truth finally unburied.